Blog Talk Radio. It's time for Breaking Chains new show, History Talk, with Dr. Levert Kemp. So turn the broadcast up and let's break chains in our history.
Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Levert Kemp, and today we're going to discuss the origin of man. We will discuss things dealing with the beginning or origin of mankind. We're going to talk about anthropolosis. We're going to look at Zenanthropus and anthropolosis. We're going to look at these terms where did humankind begin. We're going to look and go back to Professor Leakey and also Mary Douglas Leakey, how they started off looking and researching in Africa. There had been different times they were looking for the origin of man in Europe. And they found out that the different skeletal remains and then the different artifacts that they were finding were not dated that old. But they found out that if they wanted to trace humankind, and that word anthropology is the study of mankind, and the word andros in the Greek or Latin is man, and it talks about mankind. Where did man originate from? And oftentimes we think it began somewhere else other than Africa. It had been known as the Dark Continent, but in reality it originated in Africa. And I did research. I was researching years ago because I'm a curious person, and I feel that we all should be both inquisitive and analytical. We need to have inquiring mind. We need to want to know, where did I come from? And then analyze the information. Well, how did the people look, or what was going on? And as I look back and I was thinking about things, and I came up with Professor Leakey. And as I looked at Professor Leakey, I found out that Professor Leakey, he started because he was born in Kenya. He was a European Caucasian who was born in Kenya. But now he did research, being curious, he did research. But now there were other British paleontologists and others who made discovery first fossil of, proconsul skulls that existed from apes, in which now many of us even believe that our ancestral to humans came from there. But as they began to study, they found out that these were not apes. They had the ability to do different thinking and other jobs, matters that ape couldn't have done. They discovered that the robust and Zenanthropus, the skull, and it was found in Africa around the Odivia Gorge in Tanzania, and that's located in eastern Africa. And they found several layers of ancestral fossils of apes and other humans that was excavated from their gorge in Africa in 1960. Now, Mary Douglas Leakey found some other things that the earlier Louis Leakey didn't find. Also, we're going to look back at how they dated the finding, because this is going to come to you as a shock. And I want to say this because I know this is a Christian station, and I'm a theologian myself. But the Bible doesn't say they create this myth that man in the Bible started 6,000 years ago. Well, I beg to differ. The Bible never say the specific time. It said in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. Now, I want you to understand that he created mankind, but he did not say when he created which is man. We find that it talks about here about the fossil of a lady, Lucy, and they call her Australopithecus. Now, Australopithecus was a skeleton found in Ethiopia, and it wasn't found by Professor Leakey. It was found by Johansen, and Tom Gray. They were looking for stones, and they stumbled up on a find that dated back 3.18 million years old. And it was Lucy, and they didn't know how old she was. But the thing they came up with was that she was of a mature age. And the concept of it was that man came from an ape. But this skeletal thing of Lucy, down at the skeletal remains, it showed that she walked upright. And how can you know about if a person walked upright? How do they know the difference between a man and an ape skeleton? Well, a man's skeletal pelvis is made different because it's made to walk upright, which a chimpanzee who walks on four, it wouldn't be that way. And it's different concepts of, not concept, but different things. You're going to either deal with Xanthropus, and that word Xanthropus comes from, it means a genus of fossil or human-based skull that was found in East Africa. And it was characterized by a very low brow and a large modular and attentive assignment to the lower parts of the skull. It also, when they said this fossil would have came from about 2.8 million years ago, in between the glacial period, when the freezing over of the earth, it was between those times. And so it tells us that man didn't have to come from an ape. As we look at it, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, is 2.4 million years ago. And Homo erectus is 1.8 to 2.5 million years ago. But they were not found, and what was specific was they said that Homo sapiens, or the early kind, who walked on fours, they walked, but it was a thing that they came from the rainforest, but they find out that 99% of these fossils during Australopithecus, they came from around the Savannah desert, and not the rainforest. They came from around sand where it was easy to keep up with the different fossils. They were found either in Tanzania and different places that's really in East Africa. So we know the origin of man. The origin of man came from East Africa. And by radiometric dating, some of the skulls that they found and other things other than Lucy, they found was from 25,000 to 4.4 million years, and showed different stages of primitive evolution, what they would call. And they showed some that carried characteristics of apes, but then they showed some that were, even at that same time, millions of years ago, who walked upright. So that would refute coming from an ape right there, because there were people who walked upright during their time, that they claimed that it was. But the whole point about this is when you go back and you look up Professor Leakey, you'll find out that Professor Leakey was a Caucasian who was born in Africa and who did his study. Matter of fact, he was able to speak so much in the language of the people that he was raised with. And you're going to find out so much it's about Mary and Louis Leakey. They have revealed so much that the Homo sapiens have emerged in Africa much earlier than people ever thought. It goes so far back into Africa that you will find that there were humans of a human type. And this is the thing. If they came out of Africa, there's different other archaeologists, paleontologists, and many others who found artifacts that would date back that man was making arrows millions of years ago. They were able to use their hand and craft tools so many years ago. And it wasn't in Europe. They were in Africa and were able to do so many things. And so man first originated in Africa. So if someone try to tell us that as African Americans who we are, we can date ourselves back in Africa, then we're going to, sometime later on, we're going to get in the DNA of the fossils of Lucy. But the most original thing tonight is talking about where did we come from. And the best that I would tell us to study is to study about Australopithecus and Zenanthropus. And I would ask us to do the study because all of this took place in Eastern Africa. And we know who lived in Kenya, the bottom parts of Sudan, and those areas around Tanzania. And then they say the Savannah Desert. And when we think about those things, we're talking about arid lands that the people complexion were not pale because they wasn't living in a place where there was a canopy. We look at our paleontologists, our archaeologists, anthropologists, and we do that study and allow them to go back in time and show us what they came up with. And everyone they're going to come up with is that life began, human life as we know of it today, began in Africa. Now, Professor Leakey also, they had, other than Leakey, they found, a German professor found a Homo sapien skeleton in 1913 in South Africa. But the archaeologists want to deny that these bones were so significant. For the first credible find were an English couple by Leakey. And around Nairobi, Kenya, Lake Victoria, and Victoria Falls is very well known. Professor Leakey, and if people don't think he's credible, he went to Cambridge University to become an archaeologist. He trained his wife, who he loved, and they spent many years going over all the things that they needed to know. And they found a rift that was millions of years old and that an earthquake cut into the sides, and they began to find these fossils of different Africans in different graves and different artifacts. And when they were able to date it back by radiometric dating, and some had to use potassium to date it back and carbon dating, it went back to say that humankind had been in that area for 3 to 3.2 million years. And then we find that Lucy became overnight. How did Lucy get her name Lucy? During the time that they discovered Lucy in 72, back in at least during the time, not in 72, but during the time they discovered Lucy, the Beatles song was, Lucy in the Sky. But Johansson was looking for other rocks and things when they discovered Lucy. Now, Lucy was a short lady. And Lucy was roughly about not quite 4 foot tall. And they found 20% of her skeleton. But the fragile remains showed that her pelvis, that she walked upright. Professor Leakey died in 72, but his wife, continued his legacy until in the 1996 when she passed. So there are others that came up with different other discoveries in Africa, but these are some of the most important things to show us that the human origin was not in Europe or Asia, but the human origin came from Eastern Africa. Excuse me. Now, as we begin to study, and it's so important, and the reason I find the research to be so important for us to know is because the history that's been written and not taught in our schools today teaches us we don't hear about that life origin is Africa, and out of Africa, the story of out of Africa, we don't get into it unless you're majoring in archaeology, paleontology, anthropology. Unless you do that, you'll never know. And that life did start on the African continent. And I haven't seen a white person to come out of Africa, being born and raised there. Now, oftentimes we talk about a mutation of the people being mutations of people. And we're going to get into that at a later date, but as of now, we're trying to focus on the origin of man and just what does that relate to us today. Thinking about Lucy and that she was a full-grown lady and her fossils, and what did it mean? And when we get into it, we're going to find out about Lucy's DNA. And I don't want to overstep, because these are certain things that I want to bring to your attention about the DNA of Lucy at a later date. But when we find out these things about Lucy, because Lucy was walking upright millions of years ago, that she was able to do these things. And I want you to understand that all you have to do is studying about Ethiopia. Kenya has a rich history. Study about Victoria Falls, and in those areas, do your research on Professor Leakey. I've been researching him for several years, and I did find out just what was so brilliant about Professor Leakey, because he gave the credit to the people, the indigenous people who were there. In 1974 in Ethiopia, that's when they found Lucy. That Ethiopia, the skeleton found in 74, it would go on to be the most important find in recent history. We are in a time now where we're in an identity crisis. As African Americans, we're in an identity crisis. We need to know things, who we are, where did life come from. Now, and going on with our historical part, we know also that as it got to a period of time where life spread it out to other parts of the world, people went into Europe, people went into Asia, and they sell all over the world. But no matter where you settle, it's going to always come back about Professor Leakey, his discovery, about Jansen and Tom Gray, what they found in Africa. So as we move forward in our study, this is our foundation. And as we know, any foundation, any house is built on a solid foundation. To find out who we are and what role that do we play in this world today, and how did mankind come about, and where did mankind first come from. Our foundation have to be, where did man originate from? Where do our historical and archaeological and anthropologists state that we come from? The paleontologists, what do they have to say about the origin of man? And everything points to Africa and not Europe or Asia, as some tried to put it earlier. But it stemmed from a lady, and some say they found some other later, even older than Lucy, but they all came from the African continent. That takes us back those millions of years. And I'm so grateful for this, because I've often stated that in our country of the United States of America, we're not taught true history. We're taught about the cave Neanderthals. We're talk about Homo sapiens, but then you get to Homo erectus, and then they show a man walking, but they show a white man walking. They don't show a black person or a person of Lucy type walking. And I want us to think about this. I really want us to think about this. Historically, man has a Y chromosome is mainly Y chromosome. Females are X. And I'm going to get to this now. In Lucy, they found that African females, or black females, carry a strong DNA genotype towards Lucy than any other race or creed. And so that's why they say Lucy is the mother of everyone. Now, I know that you can take a black person and mutate a white person by no melanin. We have what we call albino. And that person could be born with blonde hair and blue eyes. And the two, mother and father, could be from the darkest of Africa and still possess albino. But there can be no two whites that come up with a black child, a real dark-skinned child, because that's not the way their DNA is composed. But in ours we can, and that's because I really truly believe in my heart, that's because we are the original origin of mankind came from Africa. That's why we're able to do this. And if you could look, even in Africa today, that it don't have to be. We don't have to be interbreeding with whites to have a pointed nose. If all you have to do is go to the Sudan and in East Africa, most of the people are born with pointed nose. Most of them in the Western Africa and around the rainforest, yes, most of them have broad noses. Their hair texture is different in different areas that you live in. They say that in thousands of years there have been Aboriginal people living on different islands whose hair texture is different. So it's not limited in creation to just blacks to have certain type hair. But as we go along with it, and we find that we compose so much of this world came and started in Africa. And dealing with Africa is not just one single continent. There's so many nations within the continent of Africa. And we're going to get into that a little bit later about how it was split up. But there are certain books that we can purchase to find out about the origins of mankind. And one of them is Unveiling. It was written in 1969, and it talks about unveiling man's origin, 10 decades of thoughts about human evolution, L.S.B. Leakey and Vanna Morris Goodall. And if you want to find out about it, about unveiling it, it's going to give you a history and tell you where mankind really came from and all the studies that's been done and how it's going to send you back to East Africa. And those who are following the show, you know, I don't go with, you know, Darwin's theory of evolution that he came about with 1859. You know, that started with that, a theory of evolution. I don't think that man mutated like he says about the monkey and, you know, Passamanians. And he furthered his prophesied that the day would come when it would be shown that Africa had been the main evolutionary center of all the older world primates as well as humans. But I really don't believe in that theory, because I would believe that if we came from apes, that we would still be evolving. I would even believe that one day I would walk by a cage at a zoo and someone might ask me to let them out. That's just how weak I think that theory is of evolution, with Darwin's theory of evolution, or we came from a single cell amoeba. But I believe that God created us, and He created us in that area. And once I get a little further in, I'm gonna to get my master's, I wrote about in my thesis. I wrote about the Bible, and what I wrote about, I thought that I felt that that's where the origin of man happened, where the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet at on the southern parts of Ethiopia and down toward the Sudan, where it breaks off before it get to Uganda, and why it breaks off and goes through Egypt. And I'm going to get into a whole lot of those things a little bit later, and share with you some of the things I came up with. And, you know, I think about this all the time, about reading and researching and understanding the Hebrew and the Greek. And even in Professor Leakey and others that did things, different word terms that they used came from the Latin terms Zen and Xanthropus. And if you look it up, you'll find out that some parts of it came, the word Zen really came from a Latin term, and Zen and Xanthropy Xanthropy really came from Asian, and the other part, Atropy, came from Africa. And so a lot of times you heard different individuals say that Xanthropy were dealt with Africa, because it did. It dealt with Eastern Africa, to be specific. And so as we pay homage to this, I know Black history, and I don't believe that our history began in America 300 and something years ago on this continent, not quite 4. But I believe that our history began from the beginning of time, that God made us all in his own image and in his likeness, mind, emotion, and intellect, not we. God is a spirit. But I did my research, and I found that man first existed, mankind, anthros, first existed in Africa. And without Africa, there would be no mankind, because God chose that place, put man. I was talking with some of my students the other night, and we were studying, and I brought up the idea about studying about Professor Leakey, and look over his Oxford biographies and see what he had to say, because he wrote different areas that he was studying, and he wrote it in his biography. And as he came up with different appropriate discoveries, he would write about them. And he was trying to, since the people had it, whereas, and it's been this way for so many years, that when it comes to Africa, people don't give Africa the credit that we really deserve. The dark continent, nothing can come from it, but all life resonated from that very place. I would go further and talk about the DNA of Lucy. I'm going to go on because we have time tonight. When you look up Professor Leakey, look up the DNA analogy and about the genotype that you have and where would that end up, and they would come and let you know that it is more closely found in black women, African women of African descent, or black women, that you'll find more of Lucy DNA in those people, because the X chromosome deal mainly closer with the females. Y deals with the male, and that throughout that part, you're going to find out that black males was next, because you carry the DNA, we carry the DNA of our mother. But at the same time, the white female also had it next to the white black male, because that's in the area in which she's a female. And so she's close to Lucy too. Now, when in studying all these things and finding out that the white male also carried, but theirs is least known because they have a very little of their mother. They carry Lucy X chromosome and very weak Y. Now this is just a little something about Professor Leakey. Professor Leakey was born on August the 7th, 1903 in Kenya. His wife, Mary Leakey, established an excavation at a site in Odova Gorge to search for fossils. The team made an unprecedented discovery of hominids, millions of years old, linked to human evolution, including H. herbivorus and H. erectus. And Homo erectus, when they say H. herbivorus, and they talk about herbivorus, that was years, a couple of million years after the Ice Age. And they also have about H. erectus, Leakey, a vivid lecturer and author who also worked in primatologist, okay. He worked with that, but he talks about Homo erectus, and that deals with man walking upright. And that's simply all it means, that man walk upright. There it says that man evolved from being a monkey, but then as he would continue to look for it, they found out that Louis Seymour Leakey, who was born in Kenya, he found out through his study that when they were thinking about Homo habilis, or either the origin of man, that man was already walking upright. They found some monkeys that they said was close to man that were walked on fours, and they thought that's where we came from. But as they did study, they found out that they had mankind was already walking upright and had the ability to think further than any ape would ever be. Now, here it is. They say, okay, Darwin and other different people had always held fast to Charles Darwin's belief that humanity originated from Africa, defy the conventional belief that the species origin was from Asia or Europe. And they talk about how Leakey, when he finished college, he returned to Africa, where he had been doing his study, where he had been doing his dig, but he went to colleges, Cambridge and others, to get his education. But when he came back to where he was born. He was born in Kenya. And I want to tell you, like, Professor Louis Leakey was so dedicated to finding the origin of man, and he found it. He didn't have to go far to find it. People found the Peking man and wanted to say that it was the oldest. And they're talking about Peking man, and we're talking about South Africa and Neanderthals in Europe, but it raised creationism and events such as the Scope trial, which sprang first. But when you go back, they find through their radio metric dating that they have, none of them go further back than Zen and Australopithecus. So we're talking about millions of years, not thousands of years, that these fossils are today. And this is research that it's sort of hard for me to explain to you, is because if you don't have a background in anthropology or paleontology, pretty hard. I mean, even reading it, you would have to even take different dictionaries, but the different magazines that even granted different relationships with Leakey, like the National Geographic, the Society agreed to fund Leakey's research. And you've heard about the National Geographic and different other societies that sponsored all of his research, because he had a legitimate hold on all his prehistorical things. Nairobi in 1947 had irregular intervals ever since Lewis served as a curator for a museum. He was bringing back all these artifacts from Africa. And what it was showing, that man was making tools and pottery. Before that, when they claimed man was still walking like an animal, like a monkey. So this is just, although they thought that Africa knew that Africa came from, that humankind originated from Africa. Darwin thought it originated from the monkeys. Again, it would be so hard for me to ever think that, because of my belief in God, is that God created everything. So I don't want anyone to get me confused with somebody preaching that man was a monkey. And that because man came from Africa, Africans are not monkeys. We are not monkeys. We are human. We're made in God's image. So now you know that tonight we've studied about Xanthropus, and we know that is the genus of fossils or homid based on skulls found in Eastern Africa, characterized by how they look. And we're also talking about, because now we're looking at things that's 2.8 million with Zen and Australopithecus, which 1.8 to 2.5 million years ago. And this is the origin of man, and it comes out of Africa. So this is what our podcast is about tonight. To start us off is dealing with out of Africa. Where did we begin? How did we begin? Many are listening because we're listening for our history, but I know that we're all trying to look at it from a theological standpoint. Does the Bible go back during different times? What about different animals that extinct? When were they here? That the Bible answers those questions, and I guess at a different time we'll get into that. But as of right now, I was just trying to find if we had any calls or someone needed a clarification on anything dealing with Pithecus or Australopithecus, or Xanthropus or Australopithecus. Excuse me. I'm sitting and waiting to hear from anyone that have any questions tonight on our podcast dealing with where did mankind begin, and going from a scientific anthropologist, paleontologist, and other pure forms and artifacts found by archaeologists. Where did we come from? That's the question tonight, and I pray that I was able to answer it, but I wanted to take any, just take any questions that was actually pertaining to those things about Xanthropus and
well, Dr. Kemp,
yes,
I would like, yes, sir, I would just like to know, just to get some more definition on those words, because I'm sure a lot of people for the first time is, hearing about this. So, because that is our start. Our start comes in the different stories of our starters come from so many places, and even you saying that for a while we've heard that we come from apes, knowing that we didn't come from apes, but a lot of people's definition on their identity is still lost out there. So the Amphipithecus, and those words there have never been heard across these airways for sure. So can you just give those definitions again on that, please?
Okay. When you're dealing with Xanthropus, or Xanthropy, you're dealing with meaning that some of the fossils that were found came from Eastern Africa. Some people try to call the word Zen meaning Africa, but where did it come from? It's a genus of fossil homid based on skulls found in Eastern Africa. So that's where that came from. Now, when you're dealing with Lucy and Australopithecus, it was some skeletal remains found in Ethiopia around in 1974. And the name Lucy just simply comes from the name about the Beatles singing a song to a lady called Lucy.
Right. Okay.
And now this is didn't come from, was not simply because of her upending that she just told it through a way to the thought of something about that man came through evolutional process because now she's a household name. And Lucy will be about 3.18 million years old. And Johansson and Tom Gray, they were just looking for rocks, and they stumbled upon Lucy. And so all of this stuff, the Zen and talking about the skull, that where they found them, and they found the other parts, and they found not her other parts, but other skeletal remains in different places where the Deville Gorge that was separated by earthquake, and they were able to go through different layers of sediment and volcanic ash and found burial ground of whole African villages. And the people and the way they did it was they had to put potassium. They couldn't do a radiometric dating. They had to put potassium because they were so old. They had to add some potassium to that system for carbon dating, and they could come up with an age of anywhere in between 1.8 million to 2.5 million for this Australopithecus and things. And it also with Australopithecus and others, it broke the myth that man came from like the jungle parts, like the rainforest areas of Middle Africa, where there's jungle, that the man actually came from around the savannah area, and that's the desert area. And many of us have found out that if you find skeletal remains in desert buried in sand, they pretty much won't decompose as others will decompose. And I hope that's pretty much it. Just different aspects of pathology.
Yes, sir.
And different sections of one of the times is the way you could differentiate is one might go to from 2 to 4,000, from 2 to 4 million years, and another might go from 1.8 to 3-point-something million years. One is older than the other. Right. Yeah.
So is it safe to say, and I want to ask, since Lucy is that original woman, and that X chromosome from Lucy, would that almost be? Is it safe to say that that would be in every human being on Earth?
It is in every human being. That's why they call her the mother of all. That's why she became kitchen table talk, and just about when Professor Leakey and others came up with it, it became a kitchen table because they found that the DNA, what they was able to get from extract, that every race had part of her DNA in them.
Right.
that everybody's carried it, but it was more strongly found in black women. I might say this, and a lot of people may not like the way I explain this, but I want to explain something to us. The women carry mainly the X chromosome. So the mother traits will be found more highly in the daughter than in the male children. So they found that Lucy DNA was more stronger in black females than anyone else. And it was found more strong in black men than it was in white women, because they carry their chromosome than the white male. Our Y chromosome come from our father.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
So and Lucy was found in East Africa, correct?
Correct, East Africa, around the other side, south on the southern part of Ethiopia.
Right. So not to just putting out facts out here now. So not to ruffle feathers, but I know that it does and step on toes. But Lucy is the African mother, and that means that her X chromosome is in every human being on the earth. So that just proves that hey, come on, that says a lot.
That's
right
why
there.
Professor Leakey, although him being Caucasian, he says that Lucy is the mother of all living.
Amen.
If you
Amen
all trace it back, that you're going to come up and that everyone will have some African in them. Everyone, or whether we like it or not, it will be in them because that's where the origin of life came from. And the oldest fossil they have to prove it is Lucy. And if we sometimes just pick it up, I was unveiling, what's going on by Professor Leakey, the man's unveiling man's origin by Professor Leakey. It opens up a whole new world to us about who we are and where we originated from. And whenever you do a DNA thing, you're going to always notice around south of Ethiopia, you might have a 1% or 2% there. And that's how far it goes back to when, from Lucy. All of us should have it. No wonder that no person really originated in Europe. Now, we could say our great-great-grandfathers came from that area, but that's not where, humans began. Our human ancestors came from. Yeah. And a whole lot of conversation that we have come from Latin, Greek and Latin terms. And so some people I've heard one guy in Islam made a statement that Zen, the word Zen mean Africa. No, it means East Africa. That's what it means. And he had a point going there. And oftentimes they'll say, well, that stuff blacks making up. But Professor Leakey, Jansen, Tom Gray, they were Caucasians who made these discoveries. As a matter of fact, Professor Leakey sent to America and other places and brought over people to be interns to work and keep up some of his helping with his work. And they were Caucasian, and they're the ones that came up with this. But it's not being taught because what Caucasian want to say they came from Africa?
That's right.
It was hidden, and then I found out that it was hidden for many years because they called it the dark continent. No one wants to come from it. But I found out when I was taking Greek, I found out that through the Greek, Latin and the Greek, they called Ethiopia the land of the gods. I think they knew where creation really started from. They call it the land of the gods. And I always believed that the Garden of Eden was in that area because, I'm about to get into some things that I was going to bring up later on. But I would always believe that that's the Garden of Eden because I have my my thesis on it. And when I research World Mark of Nation and different other books to do my thesis, I found out some very pertinent and important information that I could share. And this is things that not just blacks wrote, but these are Caucasians who write things. And I guess, it's for us to read, but As a people, sometimes we don't pick it up or we don't think that it's interesting enough to look into, but we should all want to know where we came from, who we are, especially those of us who forefathers were sold into slavery here. Because we may not be African. We might be Semites. And many may not want to hear that because we say we're African Americans, and it's true that our ancestors did come from there. But over 1,000-some years ago, where did they come from? Where did their ancestors come from? What it was when Judah was run out of the Holy Land? Are there the people that ran up in Egypt and all the different parts of Africa? Or are there any of the part that went down in southeastern Africa? And when they took their blood type, they found out that they were the true Israelites. They were the tribe of, they found out they were the tribe of Levi, where Moses came from. So it's a lot of things that pertaining to Africa that we really, really need to know, and there are just more books that have been written about the African continent than that other books that Europeans didn't write. Africa have a rich treasure of books. There's a lot of good books and records. One of the first known universities in the world, Timbuktu, Africa. Most people don't even know that.
That's right.
I think education, we look at the Phoenicians where it wasn't the Greek or the Romans that did weight and measurements and numbers and how to write and communicate. It was the Phoenicians. That's why we got hooked on phonics. So it's a lot of things that came from the culture that blacks have, but it haven't been put into the correct perspective, because whenever we look on television, if you look at Africa, if it talks about the beginning of time, you'll say Adam and Eve was white. They talk about a 40-something story building like a pyramid, 5,000, 4,000 years ago being built. No crane. How was it built? Then you see white people. You never see that they were really black. They were black. You never see it, so as a man see it, seeing is believing it. So he who have the media and make the films in the media, and Cleopatra and everybody else in Africa, all these kings, everybody was white. Hannibal was white. You make everybody white. And so our people don't have any heroes. The only thing you know is you was a slave. And they never showed see, the picture of Africa is not, they don't show that Africa have many large cities. Okay? Many large cities are in Africa. We only show people half naked in the jungle part. That will equate if you go to the backwoods of Georgia, Kentucky, Virginia, and you see hillbillies, even Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi too, and you'll see some people, and that's what they would equate to. See the way they live. That's what they show Africa, and so people get this negative effect of Africa. I would hold our own, even in the history of America, I would hold our own people, America, accountable for the media that they've done. People from every country, before they get to America, they've seen on television, and the only thing blacks going to rob you, they're going to steal from you, they don't want to work, and anything else, because that's what was portrayed by the news media and television about them. So now it's one of those things, man. It's something that we're going to have to break that cycle by knowledge. The Bible talks about my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, and, we have to deal with that. We really, really have to deal with it. We have to deal with
That's
that
right.
problem of getting more blacks have to get into the media, television station, news station, and give the good news out.
That's right.
I would think that the people listening out there just like to say, if you go back to 2019, you'll find out that more African American female graduated from college than any other ethnic group, race, whatever you want to call it. They matriculated more than anyone else, but it's not said.
That's right.
There's so much we have to be thankful for. And pride, the origin of man started where my ancestors came from. Then as I did study and I found out my ancestors might have not came from there. My original ancestry might be as a Shemite. And I'm part of a dispersion of Israel from the Holy Land. And when sometimes some ran and left the Holy Land, the fall of Solomon temple fell, some ran off into Africa, and in AD 70, the same thing. Ran off and they had to go and hide out. And later on, slavery time came about, and they started doing warring among villages, and the villages was usually warring against the people that didn't belong there. And some say that they were the Semites, meaning that they came from Israel. They were blacks that came from Israel. They were the same complexion. Some of them were the same complexion. They had a difference, and most of the Shemites grew hair on their face, and they could grow long hair. And they say most Africans couldn't, and they didn't grow much beards. And those were the ones that were sold in Deuteronomy 28 and 68. It talks about that God was going to allow his people to be sold into captivity again. At this time by ships and sold to a foreign nation. I've heard one professor call Egypt the place of bondage. And every time in the context in which they use the word back into Egypt, it could mean back to a place of bondage. But that's a whole nother study that we have to get off into. We have so much, Reverend Howard, we have so much of a rich history that we can only vaguely just tap the surface about who we really are.
Yes.
But again, I want to say, if we need to get in contact, and I'm going to get some sources about different things about Timbuktu and different other books that you can get from there to teach you the history, because the Europeans never going to teach you the real history of your culture or where, what exactly, transpired. Now, don't get me wrong, they're good and bad in every race. They have some that's willing to tell you the truth. I'm gonna give certain YouTube things for people to look up on YouTube, and they'll see where there are Caucasians, there are people who say they're Jews, and will come out and admit that blacks are the black ones in America is the real children of Judah. I could get a map, an old map of Africa, and show you a little southwest of Ghana where they had Judah. It was called Judah. And when you look at that, that tells you who was living there at the time. when they spoke different languages. That's why when you look at Zen Zotropy or whatever Zen Zandropopy, you will find out the Ardropopy comes from Eastern African word. And a whole lot of the Asian and African words are pretty much the same as with the word blessed in the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. But it's also an African word too. Our president, our former president name was Barack Obama, and the word Barack in Hebrew means blessed, but it's an African word, but it means blessed in Hebrew. So these are things that we just finding out. We're just cutting the tip of things through study. And I think that this is going to be very healthy for those who are listening, and to take my advice to just read. Look on your computer, look on your tablet, your laptop, or whatever, your phone. Look up different words that I'm going to give you and find out what's going to be said about them. It's not going to be said that this is some black guy or some black guy just saying this. I'm going to get Caucasian take on things, and some of them are going to reveal some things that are going to shock you that they already been knowing who you are. We're the people who don't know who we are.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's why I'm trying to share all the knowledge that I and research that I've done. I would want to share with others, and I've been blessed to have Reverend Hot Rod to help me with a platform to share some of the knowledge, the little knowledge that I do have of man's origin and the history of Africans, as well as Shemites, as well as the children of Israel, and of so-called African Americans in America. And even before that was a Columbus, we need to know that blacks were in America before Columbus ever set foot, were in before the Spaniards ever brought, the Indian Spaniards ever went down in Mexico and other places. Africans have been there. They got the little, we call them like a tiki head, but a little head like with noses so broad and big old lips, the same thing you find in Africa, you find in there. And the people are only making images of themselves in South America too. So we have a rich heritage, and it's time that we start learning it and find out that this skin color that I live in, it don't rub off. February is, to me, is just another month. For me, African American history should be every day that you live. If you're African American, being that they don't teach history in high school, that the history that America teach is the biggest lie, is more lies than Donald Trump have ever told. It's right in the history of America. America is not a beautiful history. It's not a beautiful place. American history carries a large weight of hatred, savagery, and so many other things that I could call names that was done to the indigenous people and to African Americans, and also the other people who had a little tint to their color. They was all put to these different tasks.
That's good. That's good. Looking forward to all of that. That's powerful, Dr. Kemp. Very powerful. Yes,
And
sir.
so as we go along, we're going to continue, and we're going to ask that those who are tuned in for the first night, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I just wanted to give a foundation of the creation of mankind, where we all came from. The word antros means man, and that's where mankind came from.
Wonderful start. Wonderful start, Dr. Kemp. We thank you for kicking off this new show, History Talk, with Dr. Levert Kemp. And Dr. Kemp, you want to tell us what do we have planned for next Tuesday? Because we'll be here every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. What do we have on the table for next week?
Oh, next week I want to discuss just lightly touch on the dispersion of man out of Africa. But then I want to get into the biblical aspect of the history of man. I'm going to give just a little taste of things. People will say, well, man was created, and the Bible don't have anything to say about dinosaurs or anything like that. And I would beg to differ. I would tell them go to Job. And Job talk that we don't have an animal on this earth today that terror could knock down a cedar tree. If that wasn't a dinosaur what Job was talking about, I'm ready to eat the tree. So I'm going to give the name of the different things to look up for and other things. So we're going to move along. And I'll talk about the different portions of the different things, dispensation of, the different approach you have creation and which is called innocence, and to go through the creations of mankind into in the Hebrew into the history of starting with Adam and Adam and Eve. I'm gonna explain on why I say Adam and Adam, because I explain all of that. That's different other lessons. So we're going to get into it.
Wow.
And we'll move on until we leave Africa and come to America and the history here in America.
Going to be good, sir.
So each week we're going to come with another subject. So we're going to do about the dispersion out of Africa and into the biblical aspects of it, which I know everyone is dying to get into that.
Yes, sir.
But now into the biblical perspective of it, I'm going to show some things to show that even the beginning was written about Africa. There's some words that said, and then if you go back and find out where all these different semi-precious stones and things are found, they're found in Ethiopia. And then when they talk about where the garden located, they're gonna call Ethiopia's name out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna show you what was the name at the time, and show you that it was bringing that up. So it's all gonna be good. We're really gonna have a great time.
Looking forward to it.
And if I was any black man, I would want to sit down and hear this and stop saying that the Bible is the white man's book, because it's not.
All right.
Okay, Doc.
They sure be saying it too, Dr. Kemp. They love to say that.
I had that same interpretations until I really, really started researching and studying. We go by what others said and never do the research to find out what is the truth. So through research and reading, we could unlock the truth.
Amen to that. I think we all are guilty of that one right there.
Yes, sir.
So, Dr. Kemp, can you tell everybody how, what are you doing down there in Baton Rouge and the college that you're a director at, and how to contact you?
Yes. I'm Dr. Levert Kemp. I'm the director of United Theological Seminary and Bible College. Our campus located 2139 Nebraska Street, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70802. You could get in contact with me for any research or studies. Area code 225-436-6000. And I'm working with the community. I'm vice president of the Civic Association and also the community police ambassador of District 2. I do a lot of research, and then I do a lot of work with the community and bringing the community together and stopping crime and trying to get education and trades for different underprivileged kids in schools, and also dropouts, trying to give them those trades that they need to prosper in their life. And also, we're trying to get trades for those with the re-entry program who are getting out of prison. So I'm involved with our community in all the facets. In order to help them, I have to know where the problems stem from. And we have dealing with right now systemic racism, and that's something through voting that we're going to have to correct. And with the right people in the right positions, we can correct some of these things. So I'm trying to work hard and preaching and teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, and being a director of a seminary, and making sure that they're properly trained. And that's pretty much what I do most of the time, other than visiting the sick and working out I can't leave this out. I work out every day for a few hours a day. So God is good.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
God is good.
Well, yes, sir. Well, we thank you, Dr. Kemp, for giving us your time, for allowing God to use you, and being the pillar for this night right here, for this new show, History Talk with Dr. Levert Kemp. We appreciate you, and we thank you so much for agreeing to come and do this new show to break the chains in our history and getting our people through this identity crisis, so we'll know who we are and whose we are, so we can start making the changes in our homes and our communities and to our lives. So we thank you very much, sir, and we look forward to next Tuesday. And we'll be back here next Tuesday with you and getting this in and having a great time with it. Thank you very much, Dr. Kemp.
God bless each and every one of you. Have a wonderful evening.
Yes, sir. God bless you, Dr. Kemp. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to History Talk on Breaking Chains with Dr. Levert Kemp. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week to learn more of who you are. Breaking Chains History Talk with Dr. Levert Kemp, leaving a mark that can't be erased by breaking the chains of silence.
It's Breaking Chains with Young Adults Talk on YAT Radio.
Thanks for turning us on this evening. Just know we are here to assist you in recovering your light from back from the darkness. Speak the truth with Young Adults Talk Live, a ministry for the people of God. So let's join together and recover what's ours. God bless you from the Young Adults Talk family.